Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dave Abbott. I'm the Director of Stewardship and Leadership Development at the United Methodist Foundation. And I want to thank you for attending and giving us and trusting us to an hour of one of our foundation forums, which this month is Sharing God's Vision through your annual finance campaign. We're going to talk about a lot of different things. There'll be some tools that are offered, a chance for us to have some conversation and things of that sort. I would like to start with a prayer, and then I will begin to share the screen with you all. Will you join me? Gracious God, as we gather from so many different places, from across New England and beyond, we give you thanks for this opportunity to listen and to learn. I pray that the word information that I share is as you would have it to be, and we all pray that the ears of our hearts would be open to hear how you speak to us individually and as faith communities. In your name we pray. Amen. Right. So as I mentioned, the program today is Sharing God's Vision through your annual finance campaign. And we have offered foundation forums in the past. We're going to be starting them up again this year. Some will be sharing about the programs that we offer at the foundation that are free or very close to that for local congregations, whether you're invested with us or not. Others will be more specific, like today about the annual finance campaign. And then others is when we'll bring in some of our friends and have them talk about a specific area that has to do with stewardship and generosity. And just out of curiosity, you can raise your hands if you want. How many folks are here for the very first time today? Okay, yeah, all right. How many have been to three or four of our foundation forums? We got some long timers. All right. How many have been to more than 5 of our foundation forums? All right. Well, we're glad that you're all here. As I said, if you've got any questions, feel free to enter them in the chat area for discussion a little bit later. Or if it's wicked important, raise your hand and we'll try to explore it right away. And I want to begin with a few questions. And again, if you want to, you can type them into chat. You can type your answer into chat, or you can simply raise your hands. Who has a formal annual finance campaign in their faith community? And formal, you can define however you want. Okay. When do you hold it? And this is when you might want to type it into the chat. Or you can just raise your hands. How many folks hold them in the fall? How about summer? How many of you use it based on a season in the Christian year? That might be Advent, it might be Lent, or it might be the ordinary season. Okay. And how's it working? If 1 is great and 5 is we need another approach, you can either type it into chat or you can hold up however many fingers you want to give us sort of a clue. I think what we'll find out is if people share how they feel about it, some of us are going to find that we're not alone and that we're in some very familiar territory. So how's it working? 1 is great. 5 is we need another approach. And then the final question I want to ask you all is, does your annual finance campaign share your vision, or does it share your budget? And there can be a real difference. You don't have to answer, but does your annual finance campaign, whatever it is that you're doing now at this moment, share your vision or your budget? So I was just talking earlier and someone said, anytime you start with Henri Nouwen, it's a good thing. And this is the focus that we're going to be talking about. And this comes from his Spirituality of Fundraising book, pages 16 and 17. And as I read this, I want to invite you to think about what phrases jump out at you and why. From the perspective of the gospel, Henri Nouwen says, Fundraising is not a response to a crisis. Fundraising is first and foremost a form of ministry. It is a way of announcing our vision and inviting other people into our mission. Vision gives us courage to speak when we want to remain silent. We offer other people an opportunity to participate with us in our vision and our mission. We are declaring that we have a vision that is amazing and exciting. We're inviting people to invest themselves through the resources that God has given them: energy, prayers, money, in this work to which God has called us. This is the basis from which we're working today. From the perspective of the gospel, fundraising is not a response to a crisis. It's a form of ministry. Think about the words that jump out to you, the words that make you yearn to do something different, or the words that make you comfort and assurance of what you are doing. Now, if you're aware, in the United Methodist Church, we have recently been talking about mission and vision. And as we understand, the mission of the United Methodist Church is to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. The vision, which was recently crafted by the bishops who gathered, is that the United Methodist Church forms disciples of Jesus Christ who, empowered by the Holy Spirit, love boldly, serve joyfully, and lead courageously in local communities and worldwide connections. As you look at that, do you see a place for you as an individual and as a faith community in the idea of loving boldly or serving joyfully or leading courageously? Where do you fit? Hopefully, we should all fit somewhere. And my hope is that we do fit into this vision that is being created. And as we think about the United Methodist Church in general, let's think now specifically about your faith community. Do you have a contextual, which means applicable to your area of calling, to your geographic area, to your area of ministry? Do you have a contextual mission and vision statement? And do people know what it is? I mean, if someone who's brand new coming into the church, or someone who's been there 20 or 30 years, how do they learn about the church's mission and vision statement? Can they read about it? Do they see it somewhere? Do the actions of your faith community reflect this vision that you have for what God has called you to do in your specific geographic area? When I served in Belfast many, many, many years ago, we had someone who created a wooden sign and put it right over the entrance into the sanctuary. So anybody who came into the narthex and looked to their right, or who went into the sanctuary, saw what the vision and the mission of the Belfast United Methodist Church is. So now we've got a vision, or at least we know what it can look like if we're using the United Methodist Church vision. So how do we share that vision through our annual finance campaign? So as you found when you received the email, I have to get used to my spinning here. The things that we're going to cover today are, when we're talking about the annual finance campaign, and we're talking about casting the vision, here are the things to think about. Why are you doing the campaign? What's the theological grounding? When I was younger, the understanding was that it was in the fall to raise money to pay the budget. But there's so much more to it. There's a spiritual grounding to it. So, and then what is the context in which it's going to be happening? And this is getting to know your church, getting to know your community, getting to know what's happening around you. And then the question is, how will it work? And this is all the technical stuff, the letters, the sermons, the publicity, and all of that type of stuff. And then who will be involved? Who's going to be part of this celebration? Yes, annual finance campaigns are celebrations. And which of their gifts are they going to be asked to share? If you've got somebody who's a great speaker and not so good when it comes to working on numbers. You're not going to ask them to figure out the budget, but you may ask them to talk about the relationship that they have with God and how they like to give to God through this, your particular faith community, because of what's happening in the faith community. And then finally, when will it be? And it does matter. Fall is traditional, but what's the contextual that you're looking for? And so let's start with why. Again, this is not how to do it or what to do, but why do we do the annual finance campaign? It doesn't just happen, right? Some of us wish it would just happen because it's not something that we learn about. But right now, we could probably say with a quick answer, we could say, well, we have a vision for God's work in this part of the kingdom, then we invite people to participate in it, right? What does that look like? What is the why? Well, here's the wrong answer. Many years ago, when I was a real person before I became clergy, I was invited when I was a participant when I went to the Bath United Methodist Church to help with the stewardship campaign. And a good buddy of mine and we agreed to do it. And we said, we're going to have all kinds of fun with it. We had skits, we had all this wonderful stuff. We had people laughing when we talked about stewardship and talked about the bills and getting them all paid and all this type of stuff. And then we did the Pony Express, where people would go out and they would visit everyone and we'd ask them to fill out a stewardship campaign, a pledge card, put it in an envelope. They brought it back. And so my friend and I and a few other folks waited in the basement of the church. And as we waited, I could only imagine, based on what we had done and the response we'd gotten, how successful we would be. After all the numbers were put together, there was no increase from the previous year. So it's important for us to understand why we are doing it. We did it because we thought we had the bills and the budget we had to pay, but there had to be a grounding. There had to be a way for people to connect. What was the purpose for doing it? So take a moment and think about your faith community or the church you know, or maybe it would be another church, wink, wink, that you know about and their campaign. What is the why for your finance campaign? And speaking of, and when you're doing that, why do you do the campaign? What is its goal? What's the focus? What's the purpose for your annual finance campaign? Now, when I talk to folks about their annual finance campaign and why they do the things they do or why they don't do the things that they don't do, these are some of the answers. And I know none of you will have ever used these words before, but these are other people. Well, we've always done it a certain way, and so we stick to it. We don't do one because it doesn't really matter. We don't raise enough money for our budget, so that's why we don't do an annual finance campaign. Well, we send out a letter and then let folks send in their pledge cards because it's between them and God. Or the most honest answer, which is, I don't know how to do one. So that's why I'm here today, because I need to know how to do an annual finance campaign. For me, it's being where I start always is with the scriptures. And one of my favorite scriptures is from 1 Peter, chapter 4, verses 8 to 11. And that's going to be our grounding for today. And as you listen to these words, I invite you to think of which ones speak to you, which ones challenge you, which ones get you going, and you want to look further into it. The author writes, above all, show sincere love to each other, because love brings about the forgiveness of many sins. Open your homes to each other without complaining, and serve each other according to the gift each person has received, as good managers, as good stewards of God's diverse gifts. Whoever speaks should do so as those who speak God's word. Whoever serves should do so from the strength that God furnishes. Do this so that in everything God may be honored through Jesus Christ. To God be honor and glory forever and always. Amen. As you think about these words, this reading, what vision for ministry do you find in them? Which ones apply to your ministry context? And maybe these don't. So maybe there's another biblical story, or there are verses that better apply to your ministry context, because what's important is not just to present to an annual finance campaign, but to have one that speaks to the people and speaks to the situation in which you are called to ministry. Now, the work that we do here at the foundation in the area of stewardship, and if you've ever been to one of the webinars that I've led or seen me speak anywhere else, this has been where I go each and every day. Stewardship is the outward and visible sign of our inner and personal relationship with God. That means stewardship is not just the 4 weeks in the fall. It's not just a pledge campaign. It's not just money. It's everything we do, say, think, decides, the attitudes that we carry towards ourselves, towards others, and the decisions that we make as individuals and as a faith community. Everything is stewardship. When somebody looks at who you are as an individual and as a church, do they get a better understanding of God's love, of which we just read about? Do they get a better understanding of what it means to welcome all, to live out the words of Matthew 25, when I was hungry, when I was naked, when I was sick? What do they learn about you? So why is important? And if you're going to, as you prepare to start your finance campaign, or even as you've got one selected and you're moving into it, the question that you want to ask, that you want to share with people, because when you share the why, there's a connection there. Simon Sinek has the gold circle, and the golden circle. And if you haven't seen it yet, I'd invite you to go look it up. But the why is important. So then the question becomes, but what? And again, it's not what you're doing. So what we're doing, because we know that we're doing on the annual finance campaign. So the question, let me just move something here a little bit more for me. So the question, so the campaign, let me rephrase that. The what is not what you're doing. We know what we're doing, which is an annual finance campaign. So the what today is, what is the context in which your annual finance campaign is being held? And why do we need to know the what? If you remember in the scriptures, Jesus tells parables in a lot of different places. And if you are aware of the situation, the geography, the context in which he's telling them, he usually uses a story, a parable that applies so that the people who are there understand it. Does that make sense? And so as we try to figure out the context of where we're taking and making this, having this annual finance campaign, one of the places you can go to is called Mission Insight. And you can learn lots about your community, not just the faith community, but the church around you. And actually, if you talk to your district superintendent, they can get you access. And there's a lot of rich information that can be used not just for your annual finance campaign, but it can also be used to help you understand who the community is directly around you. Maybe you're in a larger town or city, or in an urban area, and in a very small circle, which you yourself can draw, you can find out who is it that lives there? What is it that they need? How can you support them? If you live in a rural area, you can draw a 5-mile circle and get to know what's happening around you. So Mission Insight is what you can do in a general sense. But for now, I created a couple of things specifically for this gathering, a couple of tools that can help you get to know your faith community. It can also help you to get to know yourself as well. And this is what I'm talking about is the context questionnaire for the annual finance campaign. I'm going to do a little of this real quick. Here's a part of it. And the purpose of this, you don't have to write all the answers down to all of the questions, but take a few minutes, either with yourself, maybe your clergy, or you're one of the leaders of your congregation, or bring your stewardship committee together and ask these questions. What are activities and actions that bring joy to your congregation? And if you can't think of any, there might be another conversation that you need to have. What ministries offer the love and grace of Christ? Some of our congregations do things that they've always done them. But how do they share the love and grace of Christ? And who are your community partners? Even in your smallest of communities, there are people who you can partner with, and they might help you to understand the context in which you serve. What's the historical information about the church? In some congregations, you've been blessed with somebody who's taken the time to write the history out. Even if it's out of date by 10 or 15 years, at least you can know what the past is, and you can go forward. What is the church most proud of when you look back? And then what's that stuff that the church won't talk about? I was with one congregation many years ago, and something had happened 20 years prior to that. And there were people on both sides, and nobody really wanted to talk about it. But when we got together for another reason, we were able to name it and begin to address it, and it actually brought together some help. So if you look on the rest of the screen, and Kristen is going to put this and the next one into the chat right now. If you don't have access to the chat, just send me an email or let her know, and she'll make sure that it gets in there. So these questions are to help you to understand what is the context in which you're serving. This next one is the one that might be a little more challenging, and probably you're going to want to keep it to yourself. You may want to keep it to yourself. I don't know. And this is the personal context. What are the things about you as you're getting ready to address stewardship that you need to name? What are your personal challenges to leading an annual finance campaign? Is it your theology? Not really. Maybe I'm very clear about what my theology is, but when it comes to talking about money, I'm not so sure. Maybe you have a fear of talking about money or have never talked about money before. Maybe your current giving situation is something that is a challenge. I talked with a group of clergy once, and somebody said, I got school bills. I can't tithe. How do I ask someone else to tithe? And the consensus was, be honest. Tell folks what you're working through and what will happen. You want to make these, one of the reasons that you may be here, and one of the challenges that you may have within yourself, is you want to make the experience spiritual, but how do you do that? And then and here's the one, especially for smaller membership churches, most of the money we're seeking is to cover the pastor's salary. I can't fundraise for myself. It's not about that at all. We have to shift your thought process from that perspective to, how is God doing ministry through this faith community? And how do I invite people to give to God through this faith community to do the work that's being set for us? Then you can look also here, what are your goals for the annual finance campaign? This is you personally, whether you're a layperson or pastor. Is it for spiritual growth? Is it for conversion? Is it for evangelism? Henri Nouwen would tell you that fundraising should be a conversion experience for the person who's being asked, as well as the person who is doing the asking. What are your goals? And then down at the bottom, there are some questions for you to consider. So these are some getting to know your context, getting to know who you are as a person, being honest with yourself. It can stay with you quietly. Kristen will have put both of those in there. I also realize now that there's two things that I did not send to Kristen to put in there, and that is the philanthropic autobiography for the individual edition, and also the community development, the community division as well, faith community edition as well. And these two items you can do as a group. You have your finance committee meeting, or you have your ad council, church council, ad board, leadership table, whatever it is that's meeting. And you hand these out because you say, I went to this absolutely amazing webinar, and they suggested that we try this as an opening devotion. And so you give out this one, and you say, you don't have to share your answers with anybody. But I want you to think about, and I want you to fill them out. Take 10 minutes or so and fill them out. What is your earliest memory of giving or receiving? Um, did your family talk about money in your home? And what did you learn about your family from what you experienced? There was one person who said that they sat down every Saturday with their dad and they watched as he tried to figure out how to pay all the bills with the amount of money that they had. Another person, in my experience, I remember my parents saying once, my mother said to my father, Jim, you're behind on the telephone bill. We need to catch up with that. That was all I ever heard about the finances of our house. So we have a lot of different experiences, and this invites people to think about it in a community setting. And then you say, okay, now that we've finished that, we're going to move to the second one, which is the faith community edition. And the faith community edition has very similar questions. Um, what is your earliest memory of experiencing giving or receiving in your faith community? Who's that person that when you think about generosity, they just come to your mind? They are an example of somebody who always seemed to be giving. What have you learned from your faith community about the practices of faith and giving? What issues does your faith community have around talking about giving in their ministry? People would love to say, in New England, we just don't talk about money in church. Reality is that we don't talk about money in a lot of churches, but we're more than able to talk about Aunt Zelda and that little boil that she has on the bottom of her foot that just, it's just horrible. Why can we talk about that, but not talk about something that God has entrusted to us? One of the projects, the things that we did in Belfast is we had a conversation similar to this, and I invited the person who was newest to the church to share their understanding around stewardship. And actually, it was around the church itself. And then the person had been there for 2 years, and then the 5 years, and 10 years, and someone who'd been there for a lot longer. And each person, especially those who've been around forever, were surprised about the perception of the church by those who were new. And the people who were new were surprised by the history of the church. So it's an interesting way to have a conversation. This might take a half hour, but it will help people to begin the conversations. And if it goes really well, you can take all the credit for it. If it doesn't, say, well, I guess I won't bring anything from that webinar back anymore. But what happens mostly is that people do want to talk about it. They want to talk about what's happening. Again, we're figuring out the what and what's going on. The next project or item that I would offer to you that we use in our Generous Church Leadership Program, which has previously been just for clergy. I'm working on a way to adapt it so that laity can participate as well. It's called the Money Autobiography. It comes out of Discipleship Ministries. Dan Dick wrote it. It's about 28 days. And if you've got a 4-week faith annual finance campaign, invite people to take this home with them and to answer the questions on a daily basis. Never going to share them with anybody, but it gets you to think, and the questions become more and more challenging as you move through the 4 weeks. Again, it's a time of personal reflection. It's an opportunity for you to share with folks what's happening. So we've done those two, so the question then is how do we make this work? How will it work? This is all the technical stuff that we're talking about with letters, sermons, etc. And I want you to think for a moment about all the campaigns that you've ever participated in a church. Might be from your youngest years to now. It might be that you've only been in church for a couple of years, connected with a church, and so you only have a couple of years. But I want you to think about those campaigns. What spoke to you out of those campaigns? What has worked? As you think about them, what ones worked? And what campaigns moved you the most to respond to to respond to God financially by supporting the ministries and missions of a church? I was with a congregation. I preached on their consecration Sunday and had a woman come up to me who said, I don't ever fill out these pledge cards. It's between me and God. God doesn't need to be involved. She said, but I see what's happening now in this congregation. And so what I want to do is I want to let them know how I'm supporting them. Because the campaign, what they had been doing, spoke to the person. The campaign showed them the why, cast the vision, and they got connected to it and they got excited about it. So here things to think about. You may create your own campaign or you may use another campaign, but here's the thing that's most important. It doesn't matter which campaign you use if you don't know your why. And here are some examples of campaigns. There's sharing one's passion. Linda Campbell Marshall, who's a retired but still serving pastor in New England, created a stewardship campaign, an annual finance campaign around quilting because she loves to quilt, and she used this book. You can either talk to her directly, or she has given me permission to keep her information. It's sermon series, studies, and all those type of things. So that we have those available if quilting is something that you like. And maybe if it's not quilting, it's something else that you're really passionate about. Um, the Consecration Sunday is a very successful program. It's very detailed. If you're going to use it, I suggest following it step by step all the way through. Had one congregation up in Vermont that used it for 12 years in a row. Same campaign, 12 years in a row. And that with a couple of other things that they added as far as incentives for people to increase their giving and being able to share and tell their stories effectively, they got a 10% increase in money that they could spend on ministry and mission each year. Do the math. Pretty good stuff. Or you can do a focus campaign, The Gratitude Path by Kent Millard. It is a small commercial. We do the Stewardship Preaching Institute. And in October, Kent Millard's going to come and he'll be our preacher. He'll share his guideposts and answer your questions for an hour. I believe it's October 8th from 12:30 to 1:30. But this campaign has got you can use it as a sermon series. You can use it as a study guide as well. I have some notes that I have used in the past. We did it in the congregation where I attend when I'm not out preaching. And they had a 15 or 20% increase. Because again, it's not that it was an amazing presentation, but it connected the why to gratitude and how we respond to God. We don't give to the church. We give to God through the church. And as a church, as a faith community, we better have stories and ways to show how God is working through us. It used to be in the old days, you went to church, you gave money to the church because the church needed it. That doesn't work anymore. Nowadays, you need to draw that connection, that spiritual, that faith connection. And it can be done in a variety of different ways. And it's not just the 4 weeks in which you are doing the campaigns, but it's also throughout the year. When you do your offering, take 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and share a story of how God is working through your faith community. It doesn't matter how big you are, how small you are, that what are the stories of what God is doing? Congregation that I know worked with the foundation for a grant. They received funding to purchase a refrigerator where the kids at their school can go when they need a snack because there are kids in that community that don't have a snack. Imagine telling that story and inviting people and saying, this is where God is at work. And it's not just at work in the four walls of our congregation, but also in the schools. And we have built relationships where we're able to serve them. That's the why. That's the stories. I had somebody once, I was sharing this information and they said, well, we just had the grease trap cleaned out. So that in our kitchen, how do you tell that as a stewardship story? And I said, who uses the kitchen? And they were able to tell me. And I said, so what you're saying is that part of what you do is provide a place where people can cook meals, where people can gather, and that you do that as an act of grace, an act of love. I said, there you go. If you If you're interested in learning more about year-round stewardship, we have some webinars that you can go to our website, umfne.org. And then if you go to our video library, and Kristen may be putting that up on our in the chat soon, you can see the different categories, and you can watch those, watch them yourself, watch them with your team, share them with your team, and there will be things there to learn. One of the things that's most important as part of the annual finance campaign is saying thank you. I'll give you a minute to read through this letter that my wife Lisa and I recently received. Does that speak to anybody here? You are a blessing to our church. We thank you for your kind and generous support. Your contributions are essential to the ongoing ministries and mission of sharing Christ's love. They didn't tell me that we were behind. They didn't tell me that the church was struggling and that they needed money. But rather, they said, in the first 7 months of this year alone, your gifts have helped us too. Not ... Your continued support will allow us to continue and expand our ministries. Saying thank you throughout the year, but also as part of the annual finance campaign, keeps people informed of the work that's being done. This came with our half-year update on what we were giving. If you don't send those out, send out a note anyway. And it doesn't matter if someone pledged $10,000 and they've only paid $10. Give thanks for what they have given, and go for there. So we're moving through this. So the next question then is who? Who's going to be involved? In smaller membership churches, it might be everybody. And it should be as many people as involved. Who's going to be part of the celebration? Who's going to make this a time of rejoicing? And Consecration Sunday, they finish with a meal when they when they collect all of the pledges and the commitment cards. Who's going to make that meal? Who is it in your church that has a reputation for awesome pie or a fabulous macaroni and cheese or whatever it is? Inviting them to be a part of that and to be a part of having a celebration. Or who is it that has a beautiful gift of writing? Maybe they'll send out a note in your newsletter, or they can help write one of the letters. And you're not just asking somebody, but prayerfully discern who it is you want to be involved. So if you're listening here, you're thinking, okay, what do I want to do? And then someone's name is popping up. Check with them and see what they're sensing. I've been praying over this, and I really think that you have this gift that I'd like to invite you to share with our annual finance campaign. Would you pray over it and then let me know what you're thinking? You're not asking them to fill a position. You're asking them to act on what God is calling them to do. I talked with one woman who said, I did not want to do this. I did not want to do this, but God kept saying, I need you to do it. And she created this amazing campaign that fit the context of where she was in church. You can invite people to participate by asking specific questions during worship. This is not just the pastor, but it can also be the person who's going to be the guide as you walk through your annual finance campaign. You can use the questions that come from the autobiographies that we shared earlier and talked about. When I think of a generous person, I think of, and you can have them put them on little stickies, those sticky things, and put the question on the wall, and then have them put their stickies, get up out of the pews and put the stickies on the wall underneath that statement. I think of one of the ministries I love at this church is, what better affirmation than to see people go up with their stickies, even if it's, well, we've only got 4 or 5 people, we don't do a lot. Yeah, but if everybody puts up the same thing or puts up 2 or 3 items, that's a celebration, something to be lifted up. That's God at work, and that's what's important. I find it really easy to give when, and have them answer that. Or you can use questions around your vision. Let's go back to the United Methodist vision, where we're going to be serving, leading, loving boldly, serving joyfully, leading courageously, and ask these questions, one a week. To me, serving joyfully means, and they write it on their little sticky and they put it up on the wall. To me, leading courageously looks like, and it's going to be very different for different folks. For those of us who are type A personalities or we're extreme extroverts, it's easy. Bump, this is what I'm going to do. For those who are not type A personalities and prefer to be are introverts and prefer to stay quietly, what does leading courageously look like? And I want to try and serve God this year by attending a Bible study, by finding new ways, by bringing this particular mission to life, by supporting the food cupboard with my presence when they give out food, those type of things. One of the things that we have done in the past, that I have done as a pastor, and others have done it as well, is but I lead a sermon and a study program at the same time. The gratitude path is there's 5 chapters, so you could do 5 weeks of the annual finance campaign, or you can combine 2 of the weeks and do a study the book at the same time. And again, it involves more people, and some of the people who won't stand up in front are willing to come to the book study. We did a generosity as a spiritual discipline during Lent. What does that mean? There is a book called, I think it's by the same title. It came out when the CEB Bible came out. And if you want more information on it, but it's a time for people to read scripture and to do a little bit of reflecting. Any book that fits your context can involve more people. Here it's not just who's going to help me organize it, but it's who's going to be involved, who's going to see that they have a role, a part in this finance campaign. Now, you may have to, if I might use the word, methodize some books to reflect who we are as United Methodists. Back in Belfast, we did Rick Warren's 40 Days of Purpose. Theology was a little bit different, but we had about 2/3. At that time, I think it was 80 to 100 folks who participated in a weekly study. And every Sunday, I would sort of lead what was going to be happening the coming week, but I would put it in United Methodist terms. So that's the important thing to do. So again, the who is not just who's going to help you to do this and matching their gifts with what's happening, but also who, as in how are getting people involved. Who are the folks who are going to be involved quietly and actively in the front? And then finally, when? When is it going to be? It does matter. Fall is traditional, but what fits the context? I preached a sermon series, a stewardship message in July in a town that is summer focused. And they do their annual finance campaign in the summer because it makes sense. Most of their folks are there. What about you? What's the best time for your church to hold it? In the winter, in the summer, fall may be perfect. And if you're doing it in the fall, why do you do it in the fall? And tie that into your why. And what about doing it one of the Christian seasons? Advent, Lent, Pentecost, Epiphany, which is sort of like the Super Bowl of generosity and stewardship, if I might be so bold. Or you can do it in the summer if your congregation is like that. And sometimes your campaign that you're going to do is not going to be something formal because there may be 10, 12, 20 people. But you're going to focus for a period of time on stewardship as the outward and visible sign of our interpersonal relationship with God. And what does that mean for us in our daily lives? Again, the best way to do this, though, is to do a year-round stewardship. And there's information in the library, but I can also have some information. I have some calendars that people have put together that show ways to make it so that when you get to the annual finance campaign, it's just simply a part of who you are. Now, I will tell you that when I started this and I said to churches, you should make stewardship an annual, a year-round stewardship program. And they said, our churches will never talk about money all year round. Our churches don't like the idea of stewardship. It sucks all the air out of the room. It doesn't give us life. And so I quickly learned to say, um, implement it, just don't tell anybody about it. So when they get a thank you card in March, or when they hear about what is happening in your Sunday school with the two kids who were there, or you hear about how the church partnered with this large organization in the community, and though there was only 3 of you, you were able to make a big difference in a much larger way. You don't say that it's year-round stewardship, but you're helping people to understand that stewardship is something that is all of who we are and all that we do. Does that make sense? So I'll show you this slide, and then I am going, nope, I'll show you this slide, and then I'm going to stop sharing, and we'll come back together. Sound good? All right. So I'm looking out. Most of you are still here. That is a good sign. Most of you are wide awake. That's also a good sign. As you were reflecting, I'm going to first turn to Kristen. Are there questions that came in during that time that, because I see that there's 38 posts, but I wasn't sure what was in there.
There were no questions.
Okay.
Some were responses to what you had said, and then some questions about the folder and the questionnaires that weren't in there but are now.
Oh, they are. Look at that. She's amazing.
Well, hopefully they're the right ones because I just poked through your
Okay.
folders and found some. So hopefully those are correct.
All right. Hopefully the right ones. Kristen is going to be leaving us shortly because she has a wonderful new opportunity. She has been a godsend, and that's the type of stuff that she does. So we give thanks for what she offers. I'm going to go back to Glenn's question that he started right at the very beginning. As church attendance continues to decline, it seems that people who are attending are the loyal, consistent givers. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir with my stewardship campaign. Yes and no. Yes, people are aware of it. I did a disciple Bible study class in Belfast, and had some of the saints of the church. I was brand new. I'd only been there a couple of years, if that. And all the saints that wanted to participate. And I had one person who was brand new. They hadn't been at church for very long, and they hadn't studied the Bible in forever. And so they started asking questions that the people, the saints, wanted to ask, but because they'd been there so long, they couldn't ask. And then they began to ask the questions. So they wanted to know things that we just I assumed that they already knew, and they didn't. What I would say is about preaching to the choir is to challenge them to think about why they give to God and what does that mean. We often talk about tithing. Tithing can be a real showstopper for some because that's 10% of what I have, my income, and so what does that look like, and all this type of stuff. What Christ calls us to do is to make all that we are and all that we have available for God to work through us, for the Spirit to move us. My wife and I took a number of years to move from thinking we were really good givers, which we weren't, to tithing. And by the time we got to tithing, we realized that that's not what the goal is. The goal is to make all that we are and all that we have available to God. And just think about in your life those moments when as you were, either you knew then or you reflect back and God goes, and you go, that was God. And what did it feel like to do that act? Maybe it was welcoming someone into the house. Maybe it was hiring someone to do some work, and that may or may not have been the best qualified, but they were somebody who needed you, and they needed reassurance and the affirmation. Think about the times when you said nice things to somebody who seemed to be down or struggling, or you took or one of the youth, you just said, I'm really proud of what you've done. That's being open and available for God to work through you. So I would say that you aren't preaching to the choir, unless everyone is fully on board, but rather giving them opportunities to see how they give to God, how they can respond to God in thanksgiving and praise, while at the same time giving to God through your congregation because of the amazing work that you all are doing in the name of Christ. Is that helpful? So we've got a few minutes, 8 or 9 minutes. If someone has a question, I would invite you to, I'm going to look at this down there at the bottom of the screen. It says raise your hand to do so. Or if you don't have that accessibility or this is new, unmute yourself and say, hey, Dave, I have a question. And we will try to do what we can to answer to talk about or to answer your questions. Tim, you have a question.
I do.
Make sure to. Yep.
Sorry about that. I just wanted to unmute myself. What are your thoughts? I've been to a lot of churches where they actually share what the debt is, what it costs to operate that church on an annual basis. What do you think about sharing with the congregation so that they know what the church is up against? Because if you have to keep drawing from your endowment, you're not going to be around for long.
Yes, and there are many churches that are in that situation. I've just talked with a couple recently. The church needs to be aware, the church needs to be transparent. But if you're only bringing it up during the annual finance campaign, then you're not helping the church a whole lot. You can sort of keep them informed. One of the things I would not do, even though I did it and now regret it, is, on the back of the bulletin, you can say, this is how much money was raised and this is how much money we need each week and stuff like that. Unless you're an exceptional church, and that's probably 1 or 2%, that's always going to be a negative. And why in the heavens would I give to a church that can't raise enough money? It doesn't make sense. There's so many other options I can choose. What I would say is you can talk about where you are, but make sure that you're talking about what you're able to do. It's challenging nowadays because a lot of churches still rely on Sunday morning offerings to cover the budget. That's not going to work very often. And so during the year, you also need to be exploring other ways in which you can get income or people can contribute. Maybe from having people use your space. It may be from connecting with an organization. It may be, Auntie B's favorite pie sale or whatever, as long as it's got a Jesus connection to it. But I would say, talk about it not as doom and gloom, but it's to talk about it as, here's the reality. And because of your gifts, we're still able to do this. If we raise this much money, then we'll be able to do even more. The other thing is finance chairs usually get marked for life because they're the ones who go up front and say, church, we're $10,000 behind right now. And we need to figure out ways to raise those funds. I talked with one gentleman who did that in a church. And years later, even when he went up front, when he was no longer the finance chair, people just assumed it was bad news. As a finance chair, you also need to celebrate. Hey guys, guess what? We just paid all of our bills this month. We even paid, and we're 2 months ahead on our mission shares. That's great stuff. The reality, but we're also still struggling, but we want to celebrate these things. And that's important because nobody needs to be marked as the bad news bear at any time in their ministries. And again, keep tying it to the conversation. One church I talked with they were always 30% behind or something like that. I said, so how's it working for you? Or when do you talk about it? And they said, we talk about it at our quarterly meeting. I said, how's that working for you? It's not. I said, are you telling stories about where the money's going? No, we're not. Try that and see what happens. I'm still talking to the pastor, so it must have gone okay. But when people see the why, we know what and how, but why are we doing this? We have little Johnny in Sunday school. He only comes when his grandmother brings him, because when she gets to stay with him. But he says that he hears that he's loved. And he told us all about how he got to draw this picture of what love looks like. And that's where your money is going. There's also information about mission shares that you can find online. Show one of those videos. A smaller membership church will go, well, we got to take care of our own because we can't give beyond the church. And the reality is that when you show where your money is going and blending it in with other congregations, it hopefully inspires them to understand that you are making a difference locally and globally. And that's who we are as United Methodists. If you're all stuck about yourself, you're not really a United Methodist. And I believe that since day one, and I've been doing this for 30-something years. So, sorry, you got me preaching on that type of stuff. Other things, questions that y'all have? We've got a couple more minutes. I see yes, I see. I can't get your first. Is that Sue? Your Tyson? Yes. Yep. Hit your unmute and we'll talk. Here. Try that. And I think if you click on that, does that help you if you click on that? There you go.
Okay.
Yes.
So I want to share how you, in our Zoom meetings during COVID, Stewardship came alive under your tutelage. We had a very dedicated group who knew we needed to re-examine the way we asked for pledges. And you brought us to an understanding that changed everything, because you made sure we understood that we needed to ask the why question. Why are we doing this? What is it for? Where are we going? We just had, here on the Vineyard, we just celebrated another illumination night in the campground. And we used to put a table outside and sell hot dogs, ice cream, all kinds of things as a fundraiser. We no longer do that. Instead, we have a large banner that says, we are on a mission. And on the table, we set up a display of where our money goes. Backpack project, community suppers, clothes to go that was begun here some years ago. And it was extremely successful. People came up and wanted to know what this was all about. We had fish bowls out where you could choose the donation jar that you wanted to use. But we've been asking the why story ever since. And in our pledge campaign, we added stories from individuals. It has made all the difference. We explained ourselves, we explained why we were doing this, and we explained the spiritual side of what stewardship was all about. And I just have never had the chance to actually, I don't think I have, from what I remember, COVID time, to tell you what an impact your guidance was for us here on the Vineyard.
Very kind. If it worked, it was God, and it was so much fun, folks. All you need is people who, as she was sharing, ET is how I think of you, because it's ET that when I see your email. But when we were talking, there was an openness, as you just expressed, and it just needed people who want to ask the question. And there are people in your congregations who are just like the folks out on the Vineyard who just want to know. It starts out initially, we want to live. And the question then is, so how do we do that? And we get to the why. So thank you. Those are very kind words. Appreciate that. Well, thank you all. And may we partner together to do that. First and foremost, as brothers and sisters in Christ. And then second, as those who have been called to leadership within our congregations. And may we bring the love that is spoken of in 1 Peter to everybody that we encounter. Go in peace, and thank you very much for being here.